Hello. Tonight I'm going to talk about the Canterbury Cross. This, can you see right here? This is the Canterbury Cross, and it's a cross that goes back, way back as an artifact to the ninth century. And it's related to the Celts and the Anglo-Saxons who lived in what's now the UK. And I have DNA from, most of my DNA comes from southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, and I have some from England and France, northern part of France and the Netherlands. And here's a book. It's called The Worlds of Medieval Europe. It's the fourth edition by Clifford Bachman. It's a textbook I used when I took medieval history in college. And it explains who the Celts were and who the Anglo-Saxons were. And they're talking about in the 7th century, so about 613, there was a bitter war between Clovis's descendants and another part of Europe. It explains that uh, they experienced widespread change in this time, and that would have been in England. In the 5th and 6th centuries, a steady stream of invaders and immigrants had poured into Celtic England. Angles and Saxons from the regions of today's southern Denmark and northern Germany, respectively, predominated, but they were joined by a number of Utes, Frisians, and Swabians as well. Unlike the others in their wake, the Angles and Saxons had had virtually no previous contact with either Roman or Christian worlds. In unsularity that had two important consequences. First, the Angles and Saxons had not organized into larger kingdoms the way other peoples had done when they came to England. They arrived in very numerous but small bands, often no larger than individual clans, which meant that the political organizations of the invaders would be a long time coming. Second, they had no desire to assimilate with the indigenous Celts, as the Franks had sought to assimilate with the Gallo-Romans, or the Visigoths had done with the Hispano-Romans. The Angles and Saxons, who soon interbred, thereby becoming Anglo-Saxons, regarded the Celts as filthy barbarians who needed to be driven from the land, making up in superior numbers what they lacked in organization. The Anglo-Saxons forced the Celts from the green plains of England, which took its name from the newcomers' Angleland, up into the highland of Wales and Scotland, or even all the way to Ireland. And Anglo-Saxon England was almost entirely rural. It had to be, since the still pagan Anglo-Saxons regarded cities as evil sites inhabited by demon spirits. They settled instead in small farming villages throughout the countryside, clearing the land, draining swamps, and defending themselves against Celtic raids by organizing into local militias called fyrds. Having virtually no trade with continental Europe, no state organization, no Christian church, and no retribution as a superstitious and violent wasteland, Anglo-Saxon England was widely regarded by the rest of Western Europe as the end of the world, and last, poorest, and most backward frontier of civilization. Mediterranean writers refer to it as the Isle of the Dead, but they were wrong. The Anglo-Saxons ultimately organized themselves into 7 distinct kingdoms: East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Mercia, Northumbria, Sussex, and Wessex, and developed a unique power-sharing system under the guidance of Bretwalda. The Bretwalda was a sort of overking and reorganized leader of the 7 monarchies. He settled disputes between the lesser kings and organized joint military ventures in times of crisis. The office circulated in a set pattern from kingdom to kingdom. And then here you have a page from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, so you know that they were literate. They had a form of writing. It's an 11th century copy of the Chronicle, which is a compendium of several narratives. This page shown tells of one King Alfred's victories over the Danes in 871. And then we have a little bit of imagery from this style of cross. There's the Celtic knot. You have influences of the Celtic knot, symbolic of the Trinity, and you have Byzantine vine work all around it. And the shape is said to be a certain shape that the Anglo-Saxons used. And I made a brochure about the cross. And this is by Liam from the countyargyle.com. Few symbols bridge the divide between the pagan and Anglican worlds, quite like the historic Canterbury Cross, with an alice pate shape, echoing other Saxon crosses. This singular cruciform beautifully marries both Celtic and Byzantine influences. Behind its elegant design, however, lies an obscure history and deeper symbolism that still divides scholars today. End quote. The period would be from the 9th century AD. History of the cross. In 1867, diggers on an improved drainage system on St. George's Street in Canterbury uncovered a minor treasure. The small bronze cross brooch dating back to the 9th century became known as the Canterbury Cross. This original, now kept at the Beanie House of Art and Knowledge at Canterbury Cathedral, is a bronze and silver brooch inlaid with niello, an ornamental mixture of sulfur, copper, silver, and lead. A second similar brooch surfaced under Eastbridge Hospital, a few hundred feet away. This suggested to researchers that the design was unique to Canterbury. Why did they have a particular design for Canterbury? Materials of the original artifact. I'll put a picture of the original artifact. This here is one I had commissioned by an artisan who carved it by hand. It's made of wood. More than 150 years later, historians can't agree on the exact origin or meaning of the Canterbury Cross. One popular theory suggests the style was worn by pilgrims to the cathedral from the 1200s to 1400s. Local artists would have sold the cross as a form of talisman or souvenir. Others remain unconvinced. There's also a mystery behind it as they try to make meaning of this artifact. Miracles for pilgrims. St. Thomas à Becket, he was a 12th century bishop and martyr at Canterbury Cathedral. Pilgrims came to venerate the relics, and they attributed miracles to that intercession from Thomas à Becket. The symbolism of the cross. The symbolism of the cross also inspires differing opinions. Statistically, the delicate scrollwork around the outside edges is a textbook example of Byzantine metalwork. In contrast, the triquetra patterns in the center of each arm, these things in each arm, reflect a Celtic knot design representing the Holy Trinity. Others insist that the overlapping cruciform, circle, and square motifs symbolize the merging of the pagan and Anglican worlds, a common motif in early Christian art. In modern times, the cross stands for the symbolic Anglican communion. In 1932, a Canterbury cross made up of stones from Canterbury Cathedral was sent to each of the Anglican diocesan cathedrals around the world as a visible symbol of the communion. And dating from about 850 AD, the Canterbury Cross has acquired widespread fame as a symbol of the Church of Christianity throughout the Anglican world, from the Beanery House of Art and Knowledge. And you have the symbolism is the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the Anglican Communion. And the Anglican Communion is a family of Anglican churches throughout the world. They have a presence in Canada, the United States, which is the Episcopal Church, and many other Anglican churches in the United States. India, Japan, many countries on the continent of Africa, and all throughout Europe. Just about everywhere has a presence of Anglican Christianity. And this cross is symbolic of that communion, the Holy Trinity, salvation, and friendship. 3 good things. And that's some history of the Canterbury Cross. I thought I would make a video because I couldn't find any video that explained the history and of the Celts and the Anglo-Saxons and all that information about the cultural diffusion, or they mixed together even for trade and food and lots of what we learned about. This is a great book. It's by Oxford University Press. It was required for our textbook studies. Let's see if there's anything in it about the Celts. I saw that when I was studying about the Celts, people from the monasteries in Ireland kept trying to convert the pagans in England and Scotland to Christianity. Then Pope Gregory the Great sent a bishop named Augustine to Canterbury, and that's how Canterbury became the center of the Church of England for leadership roles. Bishops. Bishops are the shepherds of the church. We need good shepherds. A little bit about the Celts with medieval monasticism. But the dominant strain of medieval monasticism came from the Mediterranean world. An important variation emerged independently in the north that had significant influence on medieval life. This variation arose spontaneously without any visible influence from or knowledge of the movement in the south. It appeared primarily among the Celtic people of what today is northwestern France and the British Isles, and if anything, was even more popular than its southern counterpart. For many Celts, monastic life offered an escape from rural misery and clan warfare. This was especially the case in Ireland, where the famous missionary St. Patrick died circa 460, discovered to his surprise that the young men and women he converted to Christianity positively insisted on forming separate communities in isolation from the rest of society. Given that the overwhelming bulk of St. Patrick's success was with the younger elements of the Irish population, the quick rise of separatist Christian communities may well have had an element of youthful rebellion in it. The signs of the assimilation of Christianity into Anglo-Saxon culture can be seen in the survival of the names of pagan deities within the Christian calendar. Days dedicated to honor the gods Tyr, Woden, and Thor survive as our Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, respectively, while the most important day in the Christian calendar, Easter, derives its name from the pagan goddess Eostri. With a century, most of England's warrior elites had become more or less fully Christianized, although conversion of the royal masses took much longer. The last stronghold of paganism was the Isle of Wight, which formally adopted Christianity in the year 686. But Christianity had originally arrived in England prior to the Anglo-Saxons. Early missionaries like St. Ninian and St. Patrick had converted many Celts in the early 4th and late 5th centuries. So when the Anglo-Saxons drove the Celts into the highlands, Celtic Christianity went into exile as well, cut off from the rest of the Christian world and developing in isolation. It was a strongly rural and monastic version of Christianity, and it embraced a rigorous penitential discipline that may seem shocking today. Celtic Christianity had attained a high degree of scholarly and artistic sophistication, and Celtic monastic schools, especially those in Ireland, were probably the best in Europe at the time. Their most famous accomplishment were their magnificent and illuminated manuscripts. The best known of these today are the Lindisfarne Gospels and the Book of Kells, which date to the 8th and 9th early 9th centuries, respectively. And you have an illustration from the illuminated manuscripts here. I wish it was in color. The rural and monastic character of the Celtic faith, as opposed to the episcopal form of the Roman, the two churches also followed different calendars, with the Celtic church using a lunar formula and the Roman church a solar formula. And it explains how they had councils and had collaborated and made decisions together. Their two forms of Christianity came head to head, the Anglo-Saxons and the Celts. And Celtic Christianity survived in the Highlands for nearly 200 more years, but it gradually gave way to the Roman form. The Celtic influence can be seen in the aesthetic discipline and intellectual rigor that characterized English monasticism. So you have the Byzantine from the Mediterranean and the Celtic and Anglo-Saxon and the British Isles. Thank you for tuning in. Here's another showing of the Canterbury Cross. The Canterbury Cathedral and the Archbishop of Canterbury, St. Thomas Becket, and the Christian pilgrims and miracles and the heritage of it are very rich in history.